Hey everyone, it's Lexie. So in today's video I'll be sharing with you my snow reading recommendations. So I very much like winter is my favorite season, so I am very into reading when it's like cold and snowing out and all that. So like I'm totally here for that like reading atmosphere, so I'm really excited about that. So these are 5 books that I think that are perfect to read when it's like snowing out and you can be curled up by the fire and all that. So I feel like these are like optimal like snow reads. So they're kind of all over the place in terms of genre, but I feel like they have like that atmosphere. And what I really love about like snowstorms in particular is like the silence of them, or if there's a lot of snow, just kind of like that silence. And so these are the ones like that totally kind of encompass that feeling you get with like the winter silence as well. So yeah, without further ado, let's get started. So this is one that I think just like chills you to the bone, and I think it's like the perfect one to read like kind of when it's like just cold and dark, and you can kind of get that thrillery aspect to it as well. And it is Dark Places by Gillyan Flynn. I read this, I want to say like 2014, 2015. I think it was 2014, I want to say, but it was a long time since I've read it, but it's definitely one that has really stuck with me, and I think it's my favorite of her works that she's come out with. But essentially it follows this woman who is like the lone survivor of her family being massacred, and when she was a kid she testified in court saying it was her brother who's the one who killed her entire family. So she's, you know, had to live with the fact of losing her family, but also putting her brother in jail. So like maybe like 20-30 years after those events, she's approached by someone who doesn't think her brother is the one who's guilty. So as she's kind of like slowly coming to terms with what happened several years ago, we do follow the events that eventually lead up to the massacre, and it's just really spooky because you know what's going to happen and you're just eagerly anticipating it. And this one, like I said, is very eerie. It kind of deals with the occult and all that as well, and it's just you're on edge the whole time. I think like this is probably one of her more dark works, and so I think this is like perfect to read when it's just like dark all the time and like snowy, and you could lose yourself in this creepy dark world. Next up, this is one that I read around January, and I feel like it's the perfect time to like kind of read this when it's like snowy and cold, because I feel like that's how this town like comes off to me, and it is Beartown by Frederick Backman. And this book, oh my goodness, makes you feel so many emotions. So essentially the plot of this one is that it follows this small town in Sweden, and they have like really nothing really going for this town, but one year their hockey team actually is doing really well, and so when they're actually kind of making it to the finals, right kind of before that, one of the star players ends up raping the general manager's daughter, and it kind of goes off from there. But I think this book does a lot of like talks about a lot of important topics that are very relevant today in terms of rape culture, you know, how a town can be divided and how we kind of idolize like athletes. And I think it's really interesting, like because this takes place in like a small quaint town that's like in the mountains and like foresty area, like it totally has that like snow feeling, and there's something very lyrical about this author's writing. It's very whimsical, it's very poetic, and I think that's like perfect to like kind of lose yourself in during this time. But this book makes you really angry because it's like happens in real life, just how people respond to this. So I think it sparks a lot of important dialogue, and this book is like very haunting. So I think when it's like snowy out, I think that's like the perfect time to read a thriller. So this is one that I did read, I want to say towards the end, I want to say early 2020, and it is 9 Elms by Robert Brenzida. And so essentially this one follows Kate Marshall, who 15 years ago was a police officer, and she ended up taking down the 9 Elms cannibal. And so what should have been a very kind of pivotal point in her career ends up being kind of her downfall, because the press ends up tearing her apart because of that. And so she kind of spends the next 15 years trying to piece together the pieces that kind of broke after this. And so she's still dealing with a lot of the demons of what happened, and kind of has her own struggles because of all what she experienced. But when a series of murders are taking place that are very much kind of similar to the ones that were to the original Nine Elms killer. She's kind of gets inadvertently involved in the investigation. It kind of goes off from there. But I think this one is really chilling, especially when we kind of delve into more of the events that took place 15 years ago. I think it's very interesting, but I think Kate is such a complex character, and she's very driven, and she has her flaws, and I think that's why I like her so much. So I feel like this is just like a perfect one to read because it's just very unsettling. So these next two I realized are historical fictions that deal with the Russian like winter times, and I feel like that just screams cold, snowy, like just, you know, fun. So, or not fun, but like snowy, cold, atmospheric reads that are fun to read, but not to have gone through that point in time in history. But the first one is Lost Roses by Martha Hall Kelly. This is the second book in the Lilac Girls trilogy, I think it's gonna be, so you don't have to really necessarily read these in order. First one deals with World War II, this one deals with World War I. So we follow Eliza, who's a socialite in America who is friends with a Russian aristocrat, and so when World War I breaks out, there's all this kind of confusion, and then there's also the Russian Revolution side of World War I that's kind of going on in parallel with the World War. And so obviously, because being an aristocrat is not very good during the Russian Revolution, so she is kind of, you know, forced to flee, and it kind of goes off from there. But you do get three different storylines. We get Eliza's storyline in America, we get the aristocratic side in Russia, and then we also get a peasant point of view of like in Russia as well. But this one is really good. I think there's something really encapturing about Martha Hall Kelly's writing style. Like, you'll sit down and you'll be like, man, I just read 50 pages, and like you don't really have, like, you just get so like engrossed in the writing, and I think that's really special. But like something about the Russian wilderness and like the snow and all that is really like, I don't know, it's like, doesn't sound like it's a lot of fun. So, but I feel like this totally encaptures that feeling of like cold and kind of the silence of snow. And lastly, I have Winter Garden by Kristen Hanna, and this is another historical fiction novel, but it follows these two sisters that are dealing with the death of their father and their mother, who they have a strained relationship with. And so while this is going on, as they're trying to kind of work on developing their relationship with their mother, we get flashbacks to this kind of separate storyline of a woman growing up in Russia during World War II and her struggles with, you know, dealing with that as well. But I think like this one is just one you really need to experience. It takes a little bit to get into the story for this one. I feel like it's not as engrossing as like The Nightingale or The Great Alone, where you're just kind of like sucked in right away. This one is a little bit of a slow burn. So just be aware of that if you are picking it up. So it takes a while to get some traction on here. But yeah, definitely when you get into the World War II side of this story, it is totally, like, it just totally is very eye-opening. It's just how people survive that point in time is just crazy, and what they had to overcome, I think, is very, you know, it's like crazy that they had to, people had to go through that, and how people were able to make it out of that. I think it's very interesting, but there's also a lot of political maneuverings going on. There's a lot of, you know, poverty and famine and all this when it's, you know, minus 30 Celsius outside. So yeah, there's just a lot going on. But like, isn't this, I feel like this is just like the winteristy snowy cover ever, so obviously I had to include it. So that's it, guys. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Let me know in the comments below what some of your snow reading recommendations are and all that fun stuff. So yeah, thank you guys so much for watching. Don't forget to give this video a thumbs up, and I will see you guys next time. Bye, guys.